right. Welcome back, friends. We're here for session 4. Can't believe that. Time is flying, which usually happens this time of year in the spring. Is everyone doing well today? Give me a reaction. How are you feeling? Who's pumped for strategic planning? All right, there we go. They're awake. Oh, lovely. Good job. There we go. All right. Well, welcome, welcome. We're gonna kick things off and get rolling here right away. I did want to just touch base about today's agenda for folks. We'll go to the next slide. I know Leslie's juggling a few things as we get rolling here. Thanks, Leslie. We'll be doing some introductions and an icebreaker, which will be a lot of fun. I hope you all will enjoy it. People tend to get a lot out of it, so that'll be fun to start off with. And then when we get into strategic planning, you'll be seeing the things that we'll be covering. It looks like a lot, and it is, but we've got a pace that we'll set, and we will have some breaks as always, some strategically timed breaks, hopefully, to give you guys a chance to stretch your legs, bio break, get some more coffee, that sort of thing. I wanted to just also shout out to those of you that shared your strategic plans with us in advance of this session. It really helps us to show the variety of ways that you can put together something, and looking at both internal and external documents. So thank you to each of you who shared those with us. We really appreciate it. I will just highlight here that there's 3 areas that aren't on this list, but in your book at least, and that's preparing to plan, goal setting, and reporting, and we'll get into those throughout today's session. So we're going to jump right in. Dr. Palmer, did you want to address the group before we dive into the breakouts?
Sure.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Can we go to the gallery team? Hope everyone's doing well. Where are my beverage drinkers in the morning? I'm coffee, as you know, so I'm on cup 1. Hadn't gotten to cup 2 yet. Where are my soft drink folks? No soft. What? What about tea? Tea? Yes. Okay. All right. What about supplement, like some kind of a concoction that gets you that gets you going and helps you with all sorts of other things? Good morning. Thank you all for joining us today. As Rebecca mentioned and showed, our topic today is strategic planning, and so we always start this session off with a breakout and have you kind of do a little bit of work together. Rebecca is going to go into detail as to what that is. But again, our topic is strategic planning, and we have quite a bit to cover. As you saw, we have a long, long laundry list that we're going to work through today. But again, good morning, welcome back, and I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca.
Great. Thank you. Let's go ahead and go back to our PowerPoint. So this activity is a little different than what we've done before, but we're going to put you into breakout rooms, and I want you to imagine that you're alone in a dark cabin in the woods, far from the rest of the world, and all you have is one match, one singular match. You have a way to light it, but just one match. We're asking your group to find consensus amongst the members of your group with which of the following you would light first. Would you light the oil lamp that you have there, the fireplace, or a candle? Your answer can't be, we're going to light the match first. That doesn't count. So you need to come back with consensus of whether you would light first the oil lamp, the fireplace, or a candle. We're going to give you about 10 minutes. Go ahead and do a brief introduction, say hello to folks, and then decide what you're going to light first between these things. And I'll put this in the breakout room discussion so you all can see what the assignment is. And pick someone who will come back and report back to us about which they would light first. That would be great. And we'll go ahead and open up the rooms. Make sure I got 10 minutes in here. I do. And we'll see you back here in 10. All right, we got about 10 more seconds and the group will join us back here. Raise your hand if your group met consensus. Okay, sorta. Crystal's going, more or less. Do you have people that weren't willing to budge? She's like, I'm not naming any names. All right. All right, everyone should be back now in the main room. Let's go ahead and pop up our slide 8. And we can have our each of our groups report back. Who was with? I think we had 6 or 7 breakout rooms. Let's see. Room 1.
Yep, that's me. We had 3 for the lamp, 2 for the candle, and 1 for the fireplace starting out. We acknowledged that there was a reason to choose, good reasons to choose all the objects, but we ended up choosing the oil lamp because it has a consistent fuel source. It was protected from the elements because there's typically a cylinder around the flame. It was mobile, and that allowed us to light the other forms that were presented here.
Great. Thanks, Katie. So 1 for the lamp. All right. Group 2. What do we have from room 2?
I don't remember what group we were in.
Oh, here, I can read them off. George, Karen, Kim, Markia, Kina, Sasa.
I think George should talk because he saved us.
Right. We chose the lamp also. We figured when you said oil, it represented kerosene, but the first word caught our attention, which was dark cabin. And sometimes a fire can draw attention to the cabin. So we were thinking about looking at it from a strategic planning perspective. The kerosene lamp could allow us to know what's in the space, know where we were. It would allow us to find killing if we needed killing for the fireplace. It would allow us to track what other things. We could always relight a candle, but once you use that kerosene lamp to the group's number 1's perspective, it gives you fuel for a window of time to do multiple things. So it's multitasking. It's like depending on one revenue, you like that one match of a fireplace. Chances are it may not light, so you've already blown out your match. So not being too reliant or dependent on one source is what we kind of took away. Our takeaway.
I like that.
And to add to George, he also said it could give you mobility because you could leave someplace else with your kerosene lamp.
Yeah, I don't think that's come up before, but that's an interesting concept is that you could take it out to maybe find some kindling to get the fire going if you need it, that sort of thing. Interesting. Thank you. Thank you, George. What about room 3? Oh, we got AJ, Allison, Ben, Chris,
Ah,
Laura, Lisa.
that's us.
Okay.
I was lit to be the spokesperson. We chose, I think, pretty unanimously the fire, thinking
Okay.
about safety, and from there you could light your candle. You would have an opportunity for warmth, this kind of basic survival skills stuff that then you could pivot from there.
Great. Thanks, Ben. All right, we've got room 4. Donna, Kate, Leanne, Leslie, Maranatha.
Okay, that was our group. Um, yeah, we went lamp, candle, fireplace. We figured with the lamp, once that was lit, again, you could see everything. If you were to light the candle first, if it went out, then what do you do? So we figured we would light the lamp, then you could light the candle, which could then in turn light the fire.
Great. Thank you, Leslie. You guys came back with the full list of what order of operations there.
Yeah, and very
Yep.
quickly. I mean, we jumped right
Wow.
into it. We had
Okay, so
decided
that
that,
was quick. That was a
yeah, we
quick
had a very
process.
quick consensus, not in much disagreement. I mean, we were done within, a couple of minutes.
Oh, good. Good. Thank you. Thanks, Leslie.
I guess we would make a really good strategic planning team.
There you go. All right, room 5.
Okay, I think they think that's us. That was interesting because we all agreed that it wasn't the fireplace. And we started off, I think it was 1 candle and 5 oil lamps, and by the end it was a lot of people had switched to the candle. But we didn't come to a consensus because what we came to was we needed more information. We needed to have more information about what kind of oil lamp it was, because some light easy and some light hard, and how much fuel was in the oil lamp, and what type of candle it was. Because I mean, I was of the opinion, several of us were of the opinion that the oil lamp would be less easy to blow out, and then you could use it to light everything else. But some were of the opinion that oil lamps are harder to light than candles, and they felt safer lighting the candle because it was more of a sure thing to get that going in their mind. And what we discussed was how interesting it was that our past experiences with each of these tools was coloring our opinion on which one would be best to use. And so our consensus was that we were going to gather more information, in the dark, but because that's how you work when you start, and try to make a best decision based on more information that we didn't have enough to just jump in. But we did agree that the fireplace was not the answer because they're the hardest to light. But that was the thing that was our end goal, was the fireplace, because then it could keep everything else going.
Yep.
So
many analogies to strategic planning in that one. Thanks, Paige. I appreciate that. I gave you each a half point for the oil lamp and the candle. We got a half and a half there. Thank you, Paige. Thank you for being tribute for your group. Let's see. We've got room 6 and then room 7.
So, Kristen here for room 6. We didn't come to a consensus. We were very much like, I would say we had similar perspectives to a lot what was shared so far, but similar to the summary of group 5, where we just had a lot of questions, certainly the resources about how much fuel or logs, things like that were available, but like our environment too, like was it a safe environment? Did we want to be found? Like could more light, be a source of being found or not? Kind of personality was a big takeaway too. So I think there were just a lot of factors where we ended with, like Paige, we needed more information. We definitely had some people who ended where they started with like the oil lamp being a top choice, but I think others where we started with the fireplace, we were persuaded just by some of these questions that came up. So I don't know where to put our point because we didn't really we didn't land anywhere. We just landed with needing more information too.
Yeah. I'll put you as no consensus reached, which is fine. Thanks for coming back. How many times are you sent off to do something, or you have a problem in front of you and you don't have all the information that you need to solve that problem? You feel like there's some gaps, some things that are unknown to you. Yeah, all the time, right? Our last group. Jackie, Jessica, Morgan, Sam.
I will go for our last group. It was pretty easy. We went over the fireplace. It was like a 1-minute consensus. We didn't overthink it. We just said, hey, you can light everything else with the other ones and go from there.
Okay, so fireplace. All right. All right, so it looks like our oil lamp actually won. We had 3.5 for oil lamp, 2 for fireplace, a half point for our candle, and no consensus reached by 1. So looks like for this cohort, the oil lamp wins, but not by a huge margin. All right, I'm going to pass it over to you, Dr. Palmer, to summarize the icebreaker and move us into the session.
Great, thank you. If we could go back to the gallery view. So just in general, how does this all relate to the topic of strategic planning? Not sure if some of that surfaced in your breakout, but how does this exercise relate? You can unmute yourself or you can use the chat, either one. We're monitoring both. So how does this relate just to the overall topic of strategic planning, just kind of in general?
I have one comment. I think the thing that we did first was get grounded with communication. We all had a chance to kind of give a little bit of our background. And I think when you have a board or you have a staff and you have all these people in one room, I think the first thing you really have to establish is communication. And I think if you can become grounded in the group and everybody sees the different talents, the different skills, the different competencies in the circle, I think that allows you to build consensus going forward. So I think that was one thing we did, which allowed us to be not so much decisive, but to be strategic in our conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, George, for that. That reminds me of the fact that your leadership culture. So depending upon the culture of the leadership of your nonprofit agency, definitely impacts the dynamics that play out in a strategic planning process. And so culture of the nonprofit as a whole in terms of its decision making and what its paid staff and volunteer board members, because those are the roles or the stakeholders who are typically facilitating the process and managing the process. Anybody else? How does this relate to the topic of strategic planning, this exercise? Well, first of all, did it wake everybody up? Because we jump right in and then we go right into breakouts and we say, oh, now you're in the dark. They come up with some ways to lighten things up. But anybody else, how does this relate to the topic of strategic planning?
May I go?
Sure.
I think what I hear from all the groups is that it also made us evaluate the resources and the information we have about the resources and make decisions not for what we have. For example, is the match going to work, or how much oil do I have? If the match doesn't work, what else do I get? Does this sustain my survival, or is this a strategic plan to use all the resources? So in a way, for me, it was an eye-opener. By the way, I went with the fireplace, even though we reached the consensus of the oil lamp. But they convinced me because, the first thing I could think is the biggest picture, and it turns out that's the bigger goal. So in summary, what I'm trying to say is that it didn't make me think only about what I have in the room, but how I'm going to use it and what are the properties of these things that I'm using.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. There are two focal points that we're going to cover related to strategic planning that I'm reminded of as Sasa is sharing her perspective there. One is capacity assessment, looking at the capacity of your nonprofit before you get started in the strategic planning process. And then the other is asset mapping, looking at what assets are available before we get into establishing what it is we want to work on moving forward. I said two, but it's really three. And then the other is a needs assessment. So it's capacity assessment, needs assessment, asset mapping. That is what I'm reminded of with Sasa's perspective there, because oftentimes what happens is we move into the strategic planning process, and I think it was George that used the term grounded, and we're not grounded. We think that magic is going to happen at a retreat with the board and or with the staff, that somehow some magic is going to happen and we're going to be able to figure all this out at a retreat. There's quite a bit of work that happens before the retreat. And so I think that's real important if you decide that you want to do a retreat. I mean, some organizations may not do that, but that's what I'm reminded of as we think about how this exercise relates to strategic planning. A couple of things. This exercise is relatable to strategic planning from the perspective of goal setting and prioritizing your intentions, prioritizing goals. So that's kind of one way. Another point to think about is the process of strategic planning is typically customized. Although the tasks are similar, the steps that we work through would more or less be the same for any nonprofit organization, if you will. However, the activities within those steps or the work within those steps varies from one nonprofit to the other. So if you were to do just a search of what is a strategic planning process, you are probably going to uncover that there's about 10 steps in general. And then those steps are customized to meet your needs once we know a little bit more about your organization and how your organization functions and what's available to your organization. So in terms of just kind of thinking about how this aligns. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to take a look at some examples of some strategic plans. We're not going to study the plans, but we are going to take a look at some strategic plans that some of your colleagues sent over. So if I could tee up Albemarle Downtown, we're going to look at that one first. Then we're going to look at Wake Ed Partnership. So if you could get ready, person who sent us that plan. And then the Emily K Center. We're going to look at those three. Once we review the ones that were sent over, these three plans have different looks. There are different looks to the plan. Again, we're not going to study the plans, but I do want you to just kind of take a look at what the plans look like, how they're designed, and how they're structured. And for these three organizations, in our prep for today, we took time to go through and look at what you sent to us. And so, team, if we could show, and again, we start here because with the end in mind, because the end goal of the process is to actually have a plan that we're going to use and that we're going to implement, something tangible that we can share, that we can use as our guide to engage us in the work that our nonprofits are engaged in. So again, in terms of the examples that we have, it's Albemarle Downtown, Wake Ed Partnership, and the Emily K Center. And we also will be sharing these with you moving forward. Again, they're different. They're different types of ways that we can take a look at strategic plans, or that we can put strategic plans together. And so this is Albemarle Downtown. And as you can see, there are there's a specific goal. Team, if you could kind of move your arrow down to where it says goal. So there's a specific set of goals that this particular plan highlights. And I go there because most plans are going to have 99% of all plans are going to have goals, objectives, action steps. They're going to have that noted. And so here, this is identified as having the mission and the purpose and so on and so forth. And then there's an overarching strategy, but then there's also the goal that we are working towards here to achieve what is anticipated in the future. And then if you notice, there is a way of working around to achieve those goals. You can go ahead, team, and I'm going to come back to the person on the call who's a part of Albemarle Downtown. And then here you see the next goal. You can kind of see the next goal for this plan. Thank you, team, for highlighting that. And then it continues. And so if you scroll through, um, yes, then you get to the committee work. If you notice, the goal is repeated, and then the specific committees have tasks that they engage in, and then there are different variables that are a part of that monitoring process. I think that is it. And then there's a frame or a matrix for each of those goals. Albemarle Downtown, do you have any comments you'd like to make about your plan?
Sure. I have to give credit to our state Main Street Association for this template. We are required to fill all this in every year, but it's been a really good framework for us because we start with if you go back to the very first page, thank you. We have to take our 5-year vision and we update that every year. So that's already been updated for 2031. We meet in a board planning retreat every year to update this. And then the economic development strategy that will transform downtown, each of those comes verbatim from that 5-year vision. So we're always making sure that we go back to the vision to make sure that we're accomplishing that. And then the goal is pulled out from there. And what you see on page 1 under each of these different colored columns, those are all SMART goals. So we have to make sure that that we meet all of those 5 components of a SMART goal to be able to actually achieve it. And then this is part of our accreditation process each year. So we are reviewed and pleased to say that this is approved for next year. This one was approved. We're working on this next fiscal year's plan to be approved as well. But this really helps us, especially determine what our committees actually do. We might have these big ideas, but how we break it down, and then we literally have exactly what our committees need to do as far as what timeline goes. And I will say that some of these are more aspirational. This goal 1 is kind of a reach goal. Goal 2 is a goal that I think we can accomplish. And then goal 3 is something that I know that we will accomplish together. So that's really helpful.
Thank you, Katie Lynn. Thank you so much. If we could go to the Wake Ed partnership. Again, our intent here is to showcase just kind of different ways of displaying your strategic plan and finalizing the strategic plan. So with this particular plan, this is seemingly, and we'll give voice to Wake Ed here in a minute, seemingly is more outward facing. So if you notice Albemarle Downtown, and even in Katie Lynn's description of that plan, you'll notice that that particular plan was more of had some action plan components to it, meaning we can use this as a tool to help us to implement, track, monitor, assign, keep up with what it is that's happening. This particular option is more of an outward facing, although there is a behind the scenes plan that has some elements that are very, very similar to Albemarle Downtown. But you'll notice that there are some guiding principles here that guide the work of Wake Ed Partnership. You can go to the next page. There's specific strategies. So we've got our priorities, and then we've got our specific strategies that we're using. You can go to the next page. Perfect. So Wake Ed Partnership, is there anything you want to comment about your plan?
Yes, thanks, Dr. Palmer. So what you shared is exactly right. This is our public-facing element of our strategic plan. So we went through the strategic planning process and we created, our consultants guided us to create like an internal document that is very similar to what was presented by the last team. And then also something outward facing that I would say the similarity between the two are a lot of the content, the guiding content doesn't change, like our mission, our vision, those guiding principles Those are all consistent. And we then use all this information to tell our story through this case document we're looking at. But it also helps us define things that you would see on the internal plan, which are those action steps, which are more flexible. Those change each year. Those might change by the environment based on what funding we get. So all of that, we were kind of it was explained to all of that. All of that can change, but what really keeps you on track are these core, your mission, your vision, your guiding principles, your objectives and strategies. All those stay consistent and they help inform what action steps you're going to take in the environment you're in and kind of what some of those, the goals stay the same, but the tactics change, right? So that, I think that's the only thing I would add here.
Thank you for sharing. The next plan is the Emily K Center. And so again, what we're sharing with you here is kind of at a glance. And so this is a more at a glance tool that really highlights the priorities. There are 3 priorities here. And then we're going to make this a little bigger. And then, of course, you've got your specific goals that align with each of the priorities. And this, again, is more of an outward-facing resource that some nonprofits will put together so that it is a quick reference. You know what the focal points are of the plan. You know what the work is. You know what's intended to be a priority. And Emily K Center.
Good morning, everyone. So I would just add in that we actually have so many iterations of this strategic plan in terms of how to present it. This at a glance, we wanted a document that we could easily share with the public, with our families, with our donors and other stakeholders so they could quickly see what were the 3 main priorities that rose out of our strategic planning process. But then there's also this beautiful glossy book and a lot of internal documents. And one of the things for internally that all of the process is being managed by the chief officers of the organization with the input of all the staff. And so when it comes to goal 1, I hold main accountability for that, but it's with my entire programming team. And that's been a really interesting moment to have, to be the person who is collecting all of the data, but really having to work across so many people to gather that data. The other thing I wanted to throw in there is in our strategic planning process, we actually kind of as a board, as a staff, and even across our students and families all came to consensus that we want to be Durham focused. We realize that for the securing our future piece, we have to diversify our fundraising. And so that has to be broader than Durham. But it was really interesting to hear from all the stakeholders and all of the buckets of stakeholders that they really wanted to make sure that we were focused on Durham students. And so that was one of my major takeaways from that process too.
Thank you, Nefertira. And so the team has also put on the screen here another way of looking at their plan, which is a very traditional kind of layout for strategic plans. You typically have your mission, whatever your guiding principles are, values. If you have that type of information, there's typically a summary. Sometimes there's a message from the CEO or the board chair or a combination. What we're showing here is this is that infographic. Looks like it was pulled, what we looked at first was pulled directly from this particular document. And so you have that. And then here again, this is a very traditional way of putting the content together. Here's that priority. Remember, there were 3 at the beginning, and then you've got the specific goals, and then you have the objectives and the key activities. And so when you're going through that strategic planning process, you are generating the content to then be put together in a formal document in the end. Some organizations are fortunate to be able to have consultants come in and do it. Some organizations are not. Some organizations have to work with the resources that they have and develop their strategic plan. Here you see there's a methodology section. Sometimes in strategic plans, this is called the process. So a lot of times a nonprofit organization in their plans will highlight the process that was used to actually develop the plan, or in this case, the methodology that was used to develop the plan. But typically you do see that. So thank you, Albemarle Downtown, Wake Ed Partnership, and the Emily K Center. So we start here with this particular topic, or with strategic planning. We start with taking a look at what some examples look like. Again, I repeat, most of what happens is the process overall is the same. The specific activities that you engage in are customized for your nonprofit organization. And then, of course, the work begins and you end up putting your plan together. Just real quick, how many of us have never participated in a strategic planning process? Just if you could use your raise your hand feature. Never participated in a strategic planning process. Okay, all right. How many of you, okay, I think I see like 3 or 4. How many of you have been a part of facilitating the process? Like just, just kind of been a part of facilitating the process. Okay, great. Okay, all right. And how many of you, I think I kind of know, but have only been asked to contribute to the process? Like you've not really been a part of the whole overarching process, and but you've been asked to kind of give to it. So the way this is designed, this particular session, is we're going to work from A to Z. So, and we present this management function of a nonprofit in a way that you understand what the process looks like and maybe even feels like a little bit, because we're going to do some hands-on work. Because you may find yourself either you've been asked to contribute to the process, or you have been a part of facilitating it, and in some cases, you've been kind of the lead. I can remember years and years ago, I won't say the name of the national nonprofit, but I was the board chair of this nonprofit, and the CEO, I became the chair over, 3-4 years. I think you could serve 6 years, three-year terms, and I was in my second term. And the CEO did not believe in strategic plans. So this particular individual had no interest at all in engaging in the strategic planning process. And here I am, the chair, and I'm thinking, well, how do we know what we're doing? Or how do we know where we're going? Or, how does that work? Needless to say, we found a way to work through that. And then hear me when I say, and I really mean it, about 10 years later, then I kind of was able to come back and work with the same nonprofit and served as the lead consulting of doing the strategic plan. It worked for that person, but when that person retired and the new person came in, the new person was like, well, what do I do? Like, where are we going? How do we do this? And so that's why I speak to the culture of your organization. Has a whole lot to do with what that process looks like. So that's important to understand. Rebecca, do we want to do the LinkedIn poll? So we posted on LinkedIn. Yeah, there you go.
Nope, go ahead if you want to frame it.
No. So we posted on LinkedIn, for those of you who were able to chime in, a question. And the question was, what was the most challenge? What do you perceive, or what do you think is the most challenging about developing or implementing a strategic plan? I just kind of gave you one when you don't really have buy-in and you're trying to help the organization adopt a tool. A strategic plan is a tool. It's a tool in your toolbox. And it is very helpful for those individuals who have the responsibility of moving the organization forward and engaging in the day-to-day operations of the organization. All right, what we got?
You all see this. Nefertaria, who had shared, and actually Kristen too, who both had shared strategic plans with us, commented, that in the beginning of the process, I always said that the hardest part was everything, just to get the plan itself, all the work that goes into that, right? All these things that you see listed there. It is a lot of work, and she's right. If you want to do it the right way, it was a heavy lift to create something that that truly felt aligned with where they were and where they wanted to go. But being now in year 2, there's more direct accountability for pieces for the plan, and perspective has shifted. And now the real challenge is in implementation, making sure the plan doesn't just sit on the shelf like we talked about. It's a living tool that you get to use. And equally challenging is the documenting that impact. Yes, I agree. It's really hard. It's a really hard puzzle to figure out how to document that impact. And then Kristen commented and lifted up that it is a heavy lift, and it helps to have good board members involved and other partners in the process so you can carry that load. It's equally important to implement and measure and demonstrate the small yet meaningful progress we made in challenging funding environment and during a time when we've had changes to our staff. So that's certainly impacted too. If you have a big part of your strategic plan that is being supported by one area of your organization, and then you have some staff turnover there, that can be hard. You might lose some momentum. You might have to adjust your strategic plan and the timeline, right, when you have some staff turnover. So that is another consequence of that for sure. So thank you for popping these comments in there. We really like to see the feedback. It's really helpful for everyone on this LinkedIn group to read that and to be able to share in this way. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. So grab your workbook. You have quite a bit of material in your workbook. So what I want to do is I want to tell you what's in your workbook, and we're going to be referencing this information as we kind of walk through this process. So in your workbook, if you go to page 57, in strategic planning, runs from page 57 to 100. So we've got quite a bit of material here that we are going to work through. Quite a bit of material. So page 57 through 100. And team, can we go to slide 12? What you're going to see on the screen is you're going to see all of the topical areas of work that we're going to work on today. And there are page numbers by each of those areas. So if you've got your phone, you can take a quick picture of this particular slide here, and you'll see that we have all of the topical areas listed, and then we've got the page number right next to it. So you can kind of quick reference that. And I'll be speaking to what pages we're on and so on and so forth. Now, in my workbook, I'm a little old school. So I've got paper clips on my, each, so I can just kind of grab, because that's quite a few pages. So I can just kind of use that to kind of grab hold to and flip to my page. But we start off on page 57 with just kind of defining kind of what strategic planning is. And then we go all the way through up to evaluating and revising the plan. So again, startup, kind of getting prepared to plan, then the work in planning, and then we go right into the monitoring and tracking and highlighting how we do that. Our hands-on work is going to be in the goal setting and objectives and the SWOT analysis. That is going to be your hands-on work today in terms of that. We're going to be putting some documents in the chat. I'm going to be referencing these pages. We're going to be building upon each one of these areas of work. So just kind of know that that's going to be the cadence and the way in which we work through our content today. And if you look at the bottom where it's highlighted in the blue, when we did the capacity assessment, I know that was 3 sessions ago, but when we did the capacity assessment, these were highlighted collectively by this cohort as areas that we would want to work on moving forward, or areas that we wanted to kind of grow and enhance our ability to work. So we went ahead and highlighted those, and we'll walk through and talk through those as well. So we've got startup, we've got preparing to plan, we've got needs assessment, and what that means, asset mapping, capacity assessment. And so that is kind of a way for us to better understand the context in which we are doing the work through the strategic planning process. Then oftentimes there's an opportunity to revisit the mission and the vision. So that's something to kind of think about there. And then get into the goal setting. What are our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? And then there is the actual putting the plan together, the writing of the plan. Once we have it all together, as you saw in the examples, now it's time to implement, monitor, and track, and then evaluate and revise as often as we deem necessary. So again, we're working pages 57 through 100, and we are going to be working through all of these topical areas. Pages 57 through 62 is the first set of information that we are going to work through as it relates to the process. So page 57, in terms of thinking about strategic planning, this is where we begin our startup. Team, we can go to the next slide. So again, pages 57 through 62. So we've got a definition of strategic planning. We've got a truth or myth worksheet that we're going to work through. We've got, in terms of the process and what the process looks like, that's on page 60, thinking about whether or not you're going to have a committee, and then some choices that we need to think about. So we're going to work through those. We're going to work through those sheets here as we just kind of get started in the process. In thinking about who we are as a nonprofit, and how we want to go about engaging in the strategic planning process. So in terms of thinking about strategic planning, typically this is, there's a method, and like I said, there's about 10 steps that we utilize, kind of working through the process, and which are really kind of fundamental steps that help guide us through a process of determining what is it that our organization, our nonprofit organization, wants to work on futuristically. Some plans are 3 years, some plans are 5 years. We don't see plans that are more than about 3 years these days. COVID taught us that a 5-year plan might be a little bit too far out. A 1 or 2 year plan might be a little too close in to even get started in the implementation. So oftentimes you'll see about a 3-year plan. I do still see 5. I think Albemarle downtown was 5, the example that was shown.
Yeah,
So
it was
we
we had a 5-year vision, but the plan itself is just for 1 year.
Oh, okay. All right. So, and what you'll also notice is once you do the hard work, the intensive work of developing that first plan, moving forward, the task is not as weighty, because you have an approach in place and you also have a way to kind of move through the process. Go to page 58. And on page 58, we have a pop quiz for you. So we're going to do a pop quiz. And I want you to take time to answer the questions here. I'm going to go silent while you do this. Indicate whether you believe the statement is truth or myth. Indicate whether you think the statement is truth or myth. And I'm going to go silent here while you do that. And team, we can go back to gallery. Okay, and you can use the chat to kind of populate your answer. So again, strategic planning in and of itself is about a 10-step process. Each nonprofit will customize that process to meet their needs. And so going into the process, it is important for us to kind of have an understanding of kind of what the general kind of, I'll just say, vibe is about strategic planning. I gave you the one example where I was chairing and my CEO didn't necessarily embrace having a strategic plan or working through the process. And again, that varies from organization to organization. First item, strategic planning is systematic in that it calls for following a process that is both structured and data-based. Truth or myth? Truth or myth? I think we've kind of said a lot of that already in just kind of kicking off this particular session today. So that is truth. Number 2, strategic planning is a substitute for the exercise of judgment by leadership. It's a substitute for the exercise of judgment by leadership. Myth or truth? It is myth. And here are a couple of nuggets to align with that. The strategic planning process is the tool. We have to operationalize the tool. And in operationalizing the tool, meaning implementing the plan, then we are making decisions not just to develop it, but we are making decisions in the implementation as well. So the plan in and of itself isn't a substitute for us having to chime in, make decisions, and but in terms of our leadership, board, staff, or combination, it's important to kind of keep that in mind. The plan is just a document if we don't operationalize it. And so it's important to do that. Number 3, strategic planning is a smooth, predictable, linear process. I see myth. That is correct. That is a myth. So yes, there are steps in the process. However, we move in and out of those steps until we get to the completed written plan. And so that's important to keep in mind. Number 4, strategic planning guides the acquisition and allocation of resources. Is that truth or myth? Guides the acquisition and allocation of resources.
How about truth?
I see truth. All right. So truth. Yes, it is. This is true. Here's something else to align here. Oftentimes, organizations, once they have, or as a part of the process, they are also thinking about how much will it cost in order for us to achieve what we have in the plan. And so oftentimes there's a budgetary finance review analysis built into that process, which tells us what? That our finance resource, be it staff, be it consultant, be it accounting firm, whatever that finance resource you have to help you with managing the finances, should also chime in to help us to understand and know, can we even afford to actually move towards achieving what it is that we have laid out here. Number 5, the strategic planning process is about building commitment. Truth or myth? Now, over the I think we've had like 10 cohorts, 11, 12 cohorts of this institute. Sometimes we get true, sometimes we get myth on this one. And again, depending upon how you view building capacity and fostering commitment may have a lot to do with what you have here, but it can definitely serve as a tool to help build commitment. Now, depending upon what surfaces in the process, you might have to work through differences of opinion. You might have to work through helping everybody really understand the organization and what we do and how we function. Sometimes we don't all understand that the same. And so that may impact the degree of commitment that is fostered during the process. Number 6, strategic planning predicts the future. Is that myth or truth? Wouldn't it be great if it did, but it doesn't. It does not predict the future. But what it does do is it helps us to consider what might happen in the future or what could happen in the future. We did not predict COVID. And there were many organizations that were in the middle of implementing strategic plans at that time. And they had to pivot. They had to pivot from that, and they had to work within the context of what was happening, not necessarily laying down what the focus is, what the mission is, but the way in which our organizations had to operate made us have to go back and to adjust what we had in those plans. And lastly, number 7, strategic planning involves choosing specific priorities. Truth or myth? Truth or myth? I see T's, and so yes, that is truth. And so again, as we think about getting our organization prepared to go and move and work in the strategic planning process, sometimes we have to educate our stakeholders, our staff, our board, those that are going to be working with us, we have to educate them on what strategic planning is, because not everyone knows exactly what that is or what it means. And so that leads us to page 59 in your workbook. Strategic planning oftentimes is very effective when it is participatory and when there's collaboration and there's collective gathering around what it is that we want to do in the future. Strategic planning can be quite effective as a tool. It is an important part of a CEO or an executive director's toolbox, to have that, to know what it is that they're working towards. It can have a cost to it, depending upon how you approach it, and it takes time. It definitely takes time to work through the process. You know, depending upon where the organization is, kind of determines how long it might take. 4 to 6 months is pretty tight. That's a pretty tight timeline. 6 to 9 months, yep, you probably can kind of get through that process within that time frame. But it's not something you want to rush. You really want to, you know, plan how you want to approach it. Page 60, here's the process. And again, this is the general process that we work through. We try to focus on need. We do a little bit of work around whether or not our mission, values, vision, principles, all of those things are intact. We develop goals, we develop outcomes, we develop action steps. We study whether or not we have some weaknesses or some areas of opportunity that we want to garner. We write the plan. We then implement it. We monitor and track the progress, and then we evaluate or revise. All 3 examples that we shared with you today had these pieces in their process. But notice the end product looked different. And so that's where the customization comes in. Really kind of looking at where your organization is and how you want to customize the process. Page 61, it is important to think about whether or not you want a committee. Now, we are just in startup for strategic planning. We haven't gotten to the actual developing of most of what we see in the end, which is the goals, the outcomes, the priorities, and so on. But we do want to think about having a committee that works as like a work group to actually make sure that we complete the process and that we work through all the steps. And so your committee could be comprised of any of these stakeholders that you see here. You might have staff involved. You might even have some of your funders involved, depending upon the type of organization you have. You might even have people that participate in your programs, like consumers of the program. Maybe they're residents in your service area that you want to include on your committee, partner organizations. If your program focuses on youth, you might want to have a person that is reflective of that demographic. The local government, the city government, your county government, chamber of commerce. It just depends on your organization. And so just kind of keep in mind that there is a just kind of overarching kind of way of thinking about committee. Your organization has to decide what works for you. I think I saw a question in the chat about, did I miss something? Where is there 8 steps in the process of 10? What I said is that in general, there's about 10 steps in the process, but you may find some that break it out over 12 steps. I mean, when you saw that slide, that's potentially 15 steps. But just know that the work is reflective in that one slide where you took all of the, you looked at all the different topics and had the page numbers. Another item, planning, some strategic planning choices. I've already mentioned quite a bit of this. There are some decisions that you probably want to think through as you get geared up for the strategic planning process. Again, you're just kind of thinking about it. You're getting rooted in what it is that you think you want to, in terms of the process. Decisions that you may have to make depending upon what your resource availability is. Are you going to include internal or external stakeholders, and who will they be? So do you have partner agencies? Do you have organizations that you collaborate with? What staff will you have that will participate? How long of a process do you need as it relates to strategic planning? Now, when you look at page 62 and you look at the first three bullets under choices by what is the length of your process, oftentimes when I engage with a nonprofit organization and they tell me that they want to complete the process at a retreat, I kind of get concerned because the process in and of itself, just getting geared up for it, is more than a retreat. And so what we typically do is we try to hone in on, okay, what is it that you're really trying to accomplish? Are you trying to just do some visioning and you just want the folks at that retreat to help you with just kind of getting started with the visioning? That's possible. I've not seen the whole process facilitated in one retreat. And so again, just kind of think about that. Will we have a planning committee? We've already talked about whether or not you have a committee. If we create a committee, who will be on the committee? We talked about that. Who's going to lead the process? If you have a committee, I would suggest the chair of the committee. That person then helps to lead it. If you're fortunate enough to have a board member and or staff or combination of individuals who have those expertise or they have those skills, they might be good candidates to lead the committee because they understand the process and they know what's ahead of you. Who's going to write the plan? So like physically, who's going to actually put the plan together? Are you going to have a retreat? Are you going to go for an outside consultant? And if you are, there are some things that you need to think about if you're going to bring a consultant in to help you facilitate the process. That was a lot. Startup. Team, can we go to slide 13? We're in startup. This is just beginning to get your organization thinking about, okay, how do we want to approach this? How do we want to approach this? Startup. The next thing that we're going to work on is your organization ready to plan? And we're going to work on preparing to plan. So again, startup. And then we're going to go into preparing to plan. Team, I do think a break is warranted at this particular juncture. And so the time is 10:50.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going for a 10-minute break?
I think so, yeah.
All right.
They've been
Okay.
working
All
hard.
right. Regroup. And we're going to come back and we're going to do some hands-on work. Again, hopefully you were able to take a good break there. We covered quite a bit and we've got quite a bit more to cover. So, but it's all good because strategic planning is, it's an important process to have in particular, your leadership of your staff, minimally, your leadership of your staff and your board members. It's a way to build capacity. It's a way to help all involved to better understand the organization. Even when you've been a part of an organization for an extended amount of time, going through that process and working through determining what you should do in future years is a building of capacity in and of itself for many organizations that we work with when we're facilitating a strategic planning process. Our next part of our work is preparing to plan. Preparing to plan. And so there are some specific aspects of that we're going to hone in on. One is why plan. We can go to the next slide, team. One is why plan. The other is your organization ready to plan, combined with that. Involvement and commitment, which we've talked about already. Who should be involved, which we've already touched on. There's a real a handout in particular that I really like that's in this section called useful documents. We'll talk about that. We've already talked about some choices that you want to think about moving into the strategic planning process, and then what is your work plan to actually get the process completed. And so we are referencing pages 63 through 67. Referencing page 63 through 67. And pages 65 and 66 align with who should be involved. Those two pages, those two pieces of information we've already referenced when we talked about that back on page 62. So we're going to focus on completing the Is Your Organization Ready to Plan worksheet. Is your organization ready to plan worksheet? That's on page 63. And it spills over with the scoring chart on page 64. So I'm going to pause and let you score each of these items in terms of your organization as being definitely, maybe, or not sure, or definitely not. And so indicate whether or not your organization is definitely at this place and at this point in time, maybe you're not sure, you don't know, meaning, and then definitely not. And so there's about a dozen items here for you to complete. And so I'm going to go silent and let you complete those. And team, we can go to gallery view. Hopefully you're at least halfway there. And again, this is just a way to kind of query, in particular, your internal staff or that have leadership roles in the organization, and also with the board. This is a good kind of just getting us ready to kind of determine, are we ready to go into this process? Are we ready to move into this process? All right, so once you've completed your scoring, look over on page 64, and it kind of gives us a way to gauge our level of readiness. And so if your score was a 20 or more, if your score, so you're going to add up all the points that you earned in terms of how you answer the questions, and you're going to determine if you had a 20 or more, your organization is ready for the process. If you're between 15, 19, you would benefit, from the process. And then a 14 or less, it may be a need for you to engage in the process. Um, but your organization should at least do strategic planning 3 years, after your strategic planning process, but there may not be an urgency there. So again, when you look at those variables, you may want to hone in on something specific in that list that you want to work on so that you can get definitely's on all of these, right? So that you can move into, yes, we are ready. And again, what I have found is that working through the process in and of itself is a education and training experience for all involved, because we learn a little bit more about the organization, yes, but we also help to enhance knowledge about how the organization works. So that's a tool that you can use. When you look at page 65, we have already discussed who should be involved. So that's an added piece of information that you can use there. And then also on page 66, the same. We've covered that aligns with page 62. So you can kind of work through that. What you have on page 67 is another tool to kind of think about, what is it that you want to, really work on in this process? And how do you want to go about engaging in the strategic planning process? And so that's a tool there that you can use at your discretion as well. The long and short of it is, think about, what it is that you're trying to accomplish over the process. Katie Lynn, I see your hand.
Yes, I had a question about the scoring. You said that we should target to get down to a 1 to definitely for each, but then that puts you in the no urgency category. So is that,
Oh, I'm sorry.
confused
I
about that.
misspoke. I
Okay,
just misspoke. Just misspoke. I'm sorry.
so it
Wrong,
is,
wrong math. Yeah.
no problem. So we do want to target that to be definitely, so like we have these clear objectives to see if we're ready to plan, and then I'm just a little confused because it seems like most organizations would probably benefit from going through that, but it just is kind of your readiness for it.
What we're aiming for here is to give you some prompts to determine and think about your degree of readiness. So individually, if we are looking at, the first one, the organization has a clear vision of what it wants to achieve, and there's consensus around the vision. That's a 1. And so the lower number is there is no urgency for necessarily engaging, because what you will accomplish over the process are these variables. You're going to accomplish these things over the process. That's why the 14 or less is there is no urgency, but you may definitely want to put it on your radar and plan to do a strategic plan if you've not done one before.
Okay, so it's good if we have lower numbers because that means that we have more of a clear vision. Is that correct?
That is correct. That
Okay,
is correct.
thank
My
you.
apologies. I just
that's
did the
right.
math in the opposite way.
All
Yeah,
good, thank
yep,
you.
yep, yep. Thank you for that catch. And you could create your own readiness tool. I mean, depending upon, I'm speaking probably to executive directors and CEOs, because you know where the gaps are. You know where the gaps are. And so you could put your board members and or your staff in a position to kind of work through the realities that you have, and helping them understand why and how the process could be beneficial for them in particular. Let's see. Three things that we're going to tackle. As it relates to this process. Page 68 through 81, pages 82 through 83, and page 84. So pages 68 through 81, 82 to 83, and page 84. And what we propose is as a part of your process that you assess three things. You assess need for the mission and vision of your organization, and might I add, specific programming, the need for what your mission is and your vision is, and what your programs are trying to accomplish. So needs assessment, that's what that is in layman's terms. We also propose that you consider your assets that you have available to accomplish that mission and vision and or achieve what your programs are designed to achieve. So again, needs related to the mission and vision, the necessity to have this particular organization in your community, providing these programs and services in your community. Need. What is the need for that? And also, what are the assets available to your organization to meet those needs? I'm just going to pause there and just let that settle with some of us. So what are those assets that are available to help us? And then the third is, what is your nonprofit's current level of capacity as a nonprofit organization? What is your current level of capacity? Because we don't want to enter into a strategic planning process, making decisions about goals that we want to accomplish, and those goals don't align with our current level of capacity. We want to think about that. If what we want to accomplish in the future doesn't align with our current capacity, then we may have to spend some time building capacity in the course or over the years of the plan. So it's important to have a sense of what are the needs related to our mission and vision and the programs and services that we offer. What assets do we have to be in organization, to even exist as a nonprofit organization? And what assets do we have to deliver those programs and services? And then what is the current level of capacity for our nonprofit organization? Go with me to page 68 through 81. That is where you will find our information about needs assessments. That is where you will find our information about needs assessments. So again, we're looking at pages 68 through 81 for that. All right. So the first page gives us an overview of what a needs assessment is. And I'm going to have the team pull up an example of a guide to help us to be able to. We don't conduct a needs assessment in this session. We don't actually. A needs assessment is a whole process in and of itself. But what we do want to encourage you to do is to take consideration how and to what degree is the need prevalent for your programs and services and or for your nonprofit. And there are secondary reports that you can look at to help you to gauge that. But for the purpose of this session, we're going to show you a resource. It's called a Community Needs Assessment Guide. Perfect. So this is an example of, and there are other examples out there. Think about, again, think practical. Don't think that you have to go out and hire a researcher or a community development specialist, but think about ways and information that's available to you to help you to better identify the degree and level of need as it relates to the programs and services that you offer or that you want to offer. And so this is a resource that we've provided here. If you would go to the table of contents team, again, we don't facilitate a needs assessment in this workshop. But what we do is we help you to understand the relevance of a needs assessment in the strategic planning process. Let's see. There we go. So this is a guide. It's pretty straightforward. Conducting a needs assessment is an undertaking. It's almost like doing a strategic planning process. You may actually do quite a bit of this ongoingly by way of your programs and services, though. So most of you, when you're writing grants, you have to tell the funder what the need is. So in some ways, you are doing this as it relates to how you secure the resources in your organization. And so this is a tool that helps us to understand how we engage in that process. And a needs assessment process is a query. It is a let's touch base with the people we serve, or let's inquire with our partners, or let's inquire with our funders as to their degree of understanding of what the need is related to program A, B, C, D, whatever programs it is you have. And again, as it relates to the mission and vision of your nonprofit. You can do this in a variety of ways. You can gather this information by having focus groups with key stakeholders. You can gather this information by surveying some of your key stakeholders. Once you've done that, you might even share that information in a forum of some sort. So again, once you have the results of the needs assessment, you may very well be able to share that back with your stakeholders and with your board. Now, the relevance of this information as it relates to strategic planning is it helps us to gauge what our goals are going to be, what our metrics are going to be in terms of what it is we're trying to accomplish. So again, strategic planning is informed by way of information that we would garner from a needs assessment. Some of your county governments, they do needs assessments on a regular basis across a lot of program areas. Some of our foundations and funders do needs assessments because they ultimately identify the service areas or the program areas that they want to fund. And so oftentimes they're keeping up with that type of information. So again, that's what we mean there. And we've provided this link for you to reference. In your workbook, on pages, just to kind of break it up for us, 71 through 72 are some examples of some focus group questions. 71 to 72. Page 73 to 78, 79. These are 78. These are some guidelines for developing a survey, if you decide that you want to develop a survey, to help you better understand need, Every community is different. The resources that are available to you to better understand need is going to vary, but those resources are available. And And then on page 80, we've got some guidelines. If you decide that you want to have some type of a convening, if you will, and to better understand need, you might bring your partners together. You might bring partners and participants together. It just depends on how you want to approach it. But again, needs assessment. And needs assessments are compiled and they come back in the form of a final report. So that's important. Page 82, second, asset mapping. Again, we don't train on how to conduct an asset map or to go through the asset mapping process. What we do here is help us to understand how identifying our assets inform the strategic planning process. So I'm going to give the team just a minute to transition. If we could go back to gallery view, and we're going to populate an asset mapping toolkit for you. So again, when you look at the process, and the steps that we've outlined as it relates to strategic planning, we are proposing that we understand what our assets are, so that helps to inform writing our goals and determining our goals and determining what outcomes that we're going to engage in. So here's another tool. And again, very similar to the needs assessment process, but what we're doing here is we're identifying assets. What are the assets that are available to us to help us pursue our mission and vision as a nonprofit and to help us implement the programs and services that we have? And so this is a resource that we have identified for that purpose. So right here, team, this is good. So in thinking about your assets, I always like to drill this conceptually, to drill this down to specific programs and services. What assets do you have that already exist in your community that have already performed in a positive way to support the programs and services that you have? Asset mapping. And another part of this is, where are those assets geographically located? Like, where are the assets as it relates to that? Same concept. Identifying community resources that are of value to your nonprofit, trying to determine where are the resources that will help support the mission and the vision. What networks do you need to be a part of that already exist that might garner you resources to help you implement your programs and services and help you to achieve the mission and vision of your nonprofit as a whole? Needs assessment, asset mapping. Needs assessment, asset mapping. Capacity assessment. It's just as important, and we propose that as a part of the strategic planning process, that we engage in a capacity assessment of your nonprofit to gauge what your current level of capacity is. I know it was 3 sessions ago, but 3 sessions ago, we all utilized a capacity assessment tool, and we looked across 12 management functions, honing in on the 6 that we illuminate in this institute. And we identified what we wanted to work on in the next year as it relates to capacity. So we want to make sure that we are informed by need, that we have a sense of what's available to us in terms of resources, in terms of assets, and that we understand our current level of capacity. So again, important to think about that. Team, can we go to slide 17? I know we are piling it on, but the process is the process, and your organization gets to decide how you want to approach it. Again, capacity, needs, assets helps to inform the strategic planning process, helps to inform the strategic planning process, helps to perform or helps to inform the strategic planning process. capacity assessment, needs assessment, and mapping. Let's go to the gallery. I need some reactions. Y'all with me? Whew. And we got more. We've got more work to do. We've got more work to do. We're going to do some breakouts. We're going to do some hands-on work. We're going to do all of that. But this is a good, your sense of things in terms of where we are now, hopefully, is that there is a preparing to go into a strategic planning process. That it's not something that you want to just say, oh, we're going to have a retreat and we're going to develop a strategic plan. That might work for you. My experience is you're going to need more time than that. And there's going to need to be more consideration for how you design that process. One of the very first things that a lot of organizations want to do is review their mission and their vision as a part of the process. Now, any one of us that are in this space today, if you ever work with a group of people to write a mission statement and write a vision statement, you know that in and of itself, I won't even go there, but you know that in and of itself takes quite a bit of time, or it can. At the same time, as you are working through the strategic planning process, it is a good idea to review that mission and review that vision, and to gauge whether or not this is the time to change, adjust, or modify the mission and vision. Go ahead and make a note of this. If you decide to do that, add more time to that already 4 to 9 month process. Go ahead and add another 2 or 3 more months to work through the mission and vision. So if you decide that you want to do that, now with some organizations, what I've witnessed is if the organization has decided that it wants to either change or modify the mission and vision, they'll do that well in advance. Like they might do that a whole year before they ever engage in the strategic planning process, because it just takes time depending upon how many folks you're trying to query and how many folks you're trying to involve in that. So reviewing the mission and the vision, this is a good time to do that. In your workbook, on page 85 and 86, we have a worksheet for you there in that regard. But again, not every organization reviews or changes their mission and vision. And you have to kind of gauge how you want to go about doing that. It's pretty straightforward. The question is, do you want to change it? And if you do, then you've got to work through that process of making that change. So we don't want to leave that out, but we want to spend most of our time with you engaged in developing goals, action steps, and doing a SWOT analysis. So that's kind of where we want to spend most of our time. But who are you? What do you do? What do you value? Confirm your mission, confirm your vision. That's the gist of that. So that's important to think about. Team, can we go to slide 12? Once you've considered your mission and vision, and if there's anything that you want to adjust there, now it's time to go into what will be the goals, what will be the action steps or objectives, and what will be the outcomes. So here's our list. Remember, this is what we showed you about 2 hours ago. So we are at goal setting and objectives. That's where we are. If you just want to make sure everybody's together. Okay. Goal setting and objectives. Goal setting and objectives. This is where we are in our work today. And we're going to do some hands-on work as it relates to practicing writing goals, action steps, and outcomes. We're gonna move right into that work. Everybody good? Team, we can go back to gallery. So we're almost there. We're below half of all the different steps that are involved in this process. Give me some reaction. Let me know how we're doing. I think this is a good time if you're sitting, this is a good time to stand up, take about a 60-second kind of stretch because we're getting ready to go into another home stretch. And so I know the cadence is moving along. I won't say swiftly, but it's moving along. And so we want to make sure that, but we want to make sure that we're all together. We try not to leave anyone behind. We want to make sure that we are all kind of together. But this is a good time to stand, stretch. I'm giving you 60 seconds. I might even give you 2 minutes. But we're transitioning into doing goal setting work and writing our action steps and outcomes for the plan. I think some folks took me up on that, Rebecca. All right. Countdown is 60 seconds. Countdown. Take a stretch, walk around your desk. I don't know if you have time to walk down the hall, but you do have some time to kind of stand and so we got about 45 seconds. Just want us to kind of transition here. We're going to go into a breakout here shortly. You got about 30 seconds. This reminds me of, my son is now 21, but this reminds me of this song that Joshua's daycare used to sing. It was something like clean up, everybody clean up. And then they have like 60 seconds to clean. That's what sorry, that's what that reminds me of. Like you got about 60 seconds to move things around and readjust and get things together. Hopefully we are learning a lot. That is the goal here. Hopefully we are, for those of you who have engaged in a strategic planning process before and you have experience with that, hopefully we've been able to share some things that you haven't thought of. And for those of you that are new to this, hopefully this is a really good orientation for you to kind of get you teed up and geared up and ready to engage in a process. All right, here we go. Page 87 in your workbook. Page 87 is where we're going. So the heart of the plan, if you noticed on all three examples that we reviewed, there were goals. And then there were, which I consider the what. This is what we're going to do over the next 3 years. And for each of those goals, there was a family of action steps or objectives. This is how we're going to achieve the goal. So the what, the how, and these are our anticipated outcomes, the why. So if I had to give you a little code to put on page 87, for goals, that's your what. What are we going to do over the next 3 years? Action steps, the how. How are we going to achieve this goal? And outcomes is why. Why are we doing this anyway? Why are we working on these goals anyway? So what, how, and why. The other thing I want to mention here is oftentimes in a strategic plan, we have two types of goals, two types. We have goals that are focused on the nonprofit as an organization and its infrastructure and its capacity. And then oftentimes we have goals that are specifically program related, specifically related to some aspect of programming. And so what we have provided or what we're going to provide for you is an example of both of those, an example of both of those. A goal and a family of action steps and an outcome that is specifically for a program, and then also the same for a nonprofit. And so team, if we could pull up those, and then they're going to put this in the chat. So grab it out of the chat as well. And then we're going to practice writing. We're going to practice writing these. Well, before you go there, let me do one thing before you go there. Look in your workbook. Go to page 88. So we've put in your workbook, and then I'm going to show you some more examples. We've put in your workbook an example of a goal with an accompanying action steps and also outcome, okay? So if you look at page 88, there is our goal statement. This is our what. So for this particular goal, we at the center said we were going to create, develop, and establish a resource, a capacity building resource, and we were going to do it in collaboration with the nonprofit sector. Okay, so that was our goal. We're going to create, develop, and establish a community-based capacity building resource in collaboration with the nonprofit sector. And we're going to work to try to make sure this is what is called a SMART goal. So if you refer back to page 87, you're going to see goals should be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. Goals should be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and have some type of a time attached to it. I'm on page 87. Page 87. So when you look at page 88, that is our goal. That is our goal. The what? What are we trying to accomplish? And sometimes it's related to programs, and sometimes it's related to the organization as a whole. So we're going to build this capacity building resource, and then on page 89 are our action steps. These are our action steps to help us to achieve that goal. So we're going to create this capacity building resource. And then the way that we're going to do it is we're going to have a team. We're going to have a grad assistant. We're going to introduce our resource to the community. We're going to do all those things. Those are our action steps. That is our how. And then our why, page 90, is the outcome. Is the outcome. Goal, action steps, outcome. Our outcome is once we develop our capacity building resource in the nonprofit sector, once we do that, then what we're going to do is develop and implement a model for building capacity. And we're also going to have a permanent resource that provides support services to nonprofit organizations. So our goal is on page 88. This is what we're going to do. On page 89, this is how we're going to do it. And then on page 90, this is why we're doing it. Goal, action step, outcome. Goal, action step, outcome. And what we also are going to provide for you going into your work is we're going to provide for you two examples. One is an example of a program goal. The other is an example of an organizational goal. So we're going to put that in the chat if it's not there already. Okay. All good. You have this is the sample for the organization for nonprofit management. This is an example. It's a repeat, the capacity building resource. And then if we could go to the one for a program, because lots of times, many of us want that one. Here we go. Here's a sample goal as it relates to a program. So the goal is the Guilford County Resource and Referral Center is going to implement the Swim for Life program. We're going to teach school-aged children how to swim by providing swimming lessons to students at New England Academy. Okay, so that's our what. Then our action steps are our how. You can see all the details, the specifics of how we're going to do that. And then what is our outcome? Our outcome is we're going to report at least 75% of students enrolled in Swim for Life, that they will learn to swim, they'll learn to swim within 6 months, and they'll pass a basic swimming proficiency test. And ultimately, we're trying to reduce the number of swimming related accidents. So again, the what, the how, the why. And if you remember from the examples that we shared from your colleagues, I think on average there was about 6 goals or so in each one of those plans, kind of 6 areas of work that they're planning for over several years. Okay. So we're going to practice this. We're going to practice this on page 91. On page 91. And team, we're going to stay in the gallery view for now. On page 91. We are, each of you are going to practice completing your own goal, action step, outcome. You've got a worksheet on page 91. If you don't want to use your worksheet and you want to keep it clean, then you can just take out a piece of paper and do it that way. If you want to save that. Again, we want SMART goals and we want SMART outcomes. I use the SMART framework for when I'm writing my goal statements and when I'm writing my outcome statements. I use it for both. And you'll see that depicted on page 87. So you've got your example in your workbook. You've got the 2 examples that we just put in the chat. And so we want you to practice, each of you, to practice writing your family of information related to goals, action steps, and outcomes. We all good? We all together? Yes, if you got water or something to drink, you probably want to take a drink of something, just to refresh and get ready to move into this work. So we're going to give you some time to begin that individual work. I am here. If you have questions as you are working, you can unmute. We're also paying attention to the chat. But we are doing some hands-on work in that regard. I'm just going to go quiet and let you practice. Also, if you have a question, you can use your raise your hand feature. I am scanning the room, and so if you have a question. We're going to take a couple of more minutes on this. Again, hopefully you're using the worksheet on page 91 to help you kind of frame out this content that goes in a plan. So again, if you think about the 3 examples that we shared, if there were 6 primary goals in that plan, you'd have, let's just say, a worksheet for each of those goals. And you can always, go into even more detail, as you saw in the 3 examples. But in essence, that's what you're trying to achieve in the process. And so, again, if you had a set of 10 primary goals, then you would have this content, and then you could utilize this worksheet. And notice at the top, we kind of get you started by thinking about what action do you want to take, and then kind of go from there. But again, you're thinking about, well, what is it that we want to work on, and what do we want to focus on over the next 3 years, if it's a 3-year plan. And we're going to add on some more to this. We're going to add on some more. We're going to add another piece to this. We want you to walk away with the process, having been introduced to the process, and also kind of instructed on how this process works and why it takes the amount of time that it takes, in that regard. So once we have our goal, our action steps, and our outcome statement, once we have that, we propose, and again, depending upon who facilitates the process, what we propose is for each of those goals and set of action steps and outcomes, we propose that you do a SWOT analysis of each of those goals, so that you are working through what strengths you have as an organization, what weaknesses exist, what opportunities are there, and if there are any threats that might impede your ability to be able to accomplish the goal. So I'm going to repeat that because that was a mouthful. So if you had 6 primary goals that you have identified, and you have written your primary goal, the primary outcome that you're trying to achieve, and the action steps, what we propose is that you conduct a SWOT analysis for each of those. So what strengths exist, what weaknesses are there, what opportunities are there there any threats that might impede you from achieving, I call them this family of information, the goal, the action steps, the outcomes. And so in your workbook, this is the next part of your work, we have a worksheet for you. If you go to page 95, we have a worksheet for you to identify any strengths that exist as an organization or as a program, any weaknesses that exist, any opportunities that you want to identify in the future, that you might want to pursue, or are there any threats that might hinder you from being able to achieve your goals and your outcomes that you've identified. If you look at page 94, we give you a little bit more information to go with that. We give you some more prompts. So on page 94, here's some examples of what might be considered strengths and weaknesses. And here's some examples of what might be considered some opportunities and threats. So you can borrow from this to complete the worksheet. So again, we have added on goals, action steps, outcome. For every goal in your plan or whatever you've prioritized. Some of you may have 3 goals, it just depends on what you determine as being the emphasis. For each of those, what we propose is that you conduct a SWOT analysis. Remember that needs assessment we talked about? Remember the asset mapping we talked about? Remember the capacity assessment that we talked about? All of those results and findings inform your SWOT, can inform your SWOT. So again, It's an add-on, it's a building upon each of these pieces or elements of the plan. So this is a part of that process. So for the goal that you just wrote and the action steps that you crafted and the outcome that you developed, there is we are asking you to conduct that SWOT. We are asking you to conduct that SWOT analysis. And this may or may not be, we all have our individual strengths and we all have those things that we prefer to do and those things we prefer not to do. Strategic planning may be your thing, but it also may not be. It may not be, where you think that you will best serve your agency or your organization. But there are some of us where we're geeks when it comes to this, and it is informative. It helps us learn more about the organization. We should feel more empowered to represent the organization once we go through a strategic planning process. We should be better ambassadors for that nonprofit organization as a result of going through the process. But for what you have crafted, we are requesting that you complete the SWOT analysis worksheet, the SWOT worksheet. And so I'm just going to go silent a little bit and let you work on that. And then we're going to go into a breakout. Team, let's go into a break for about 5 minutes. It's 11:55. In class, find a stopping point on your SWOT, or you can utilize your 5 minutes if you like to work on your SWOT. But we will come back at 12 sharp. And as it relates to what Lisa pointed out that was in the chat, so we do have built into our training SMART-T and SMARTER goals. We typically kick off the next session with that, and we can highlight SOAR as a part of that as well. But what I do want to encourage us is SWOT helps us lean in on weaknesses, and SOAR doesn't blatantly do that. There's some inferences in that process that helps us with that. But one of the things that I found with our nonprofit organizations is that because we are so much about compassion and passion for the causes that we represent, it sometimes gets in the way of us identifying where there are gaps. And so I don't want us to miss the opportunity to study what those gaps are and what those weaknesses are. And where I see this quite often is between the board and the staff. The board has one thought process around what it is we have the capacity to do. And the staff has another perspective as to what we have the capacity to do. And oftentimes it lands in the space of weaknesses and gaps. So we'll talk a little bit more about that too. But we do kick off that next session with SMARTER, SMARTY, I think there's even another acronym out there now for how you craft goals, or how you conduct a SWOT analysis. All right, we're going to put it all together. We're going to put it all together. Go to page 96 in your workbook. Go to page 96 in your workbook. So we're going to put it all together. So when you look at page 96, you see where we have our goal. That was the example that we shared with you. You see where we have our outcome. That was the example that we shared with you. You see where we have our action steps. That is the how. What we've added, again, we're adding on. There is oftentimes, if not necessary, I might add, for us to identify who's responsible for ensuring that this goal is achieved and that we experience this outcome. So that's one level of who. And then who's responsible for all of the action steps. Sometimes what we are challenged with in the implementation is that we will identify who's responsible for monitoring and making sure we achieve the overarching primary goals, but we might miss that each of those action steps, we also have to identify who's responsible for those. So it's important to kind of point that out here. And then also the when. When are we going to accomplish the goal and achieve the outcome collectively? But also, when are those individual action steps going to be accomplished? So when you're thinking about putting it all together, this is a way in which you can frame it. As we shared at the onset, we shared 3 different examples, 3 different organizations, 3 different types of strategic plans. But ultimately, you saw goals, you saw outcomes, you saw objectives, you saw action steps, you saw priorities, you saw values, you saw mission. Those things are typically common. The process helps us customize what those goals are, what those outcomes are going to be, and what those action steps are going to be. And so on page 96 is our information incorporated into the framework. And then if you go to page 97, that's a blank page so that you can then do the same. Putting it all together. We're putting it all together. The strategic plan. And again, the strategic plan can take on a different look depending upon your organization, what resources you have available to actually develop your plan. Some organizations, they only have the resources to give you one version of their plan. They don't have the resources to give you, for example, one of the examples was an at a glance and the plan, and they may not have the resources to have committees that work on every goal. And it just depends on what your capacity is as a nonprofit organization. And I always caution us around either trying to imitate or mimic what another nonprofit does. And we've not yet determined whether we even have the capacity to do it the way that they've done it. Some of what you saw have a price tag attached to it, and that may not be your organization may not have the ability to do that. But don't think that your plan is any less. What do we want to know? We want to know the goals. We want to know the outcomes. We want to know your action steps. We want to have an idea of who's responsible for what. When are we going to complete it? How you put it on a piece of paper is gauged by what your preference is as a nonprofit organization. But we want to be able to give staff, here's where we are, here's who we are, this is where we're going. We want to give the board, here's who we are, this is where we're going. We want us all to be on the same page. And the process helps us to do that. But you want to work within the capacity that you have in so doing. So that is that. Team, I would like for us to go into breakouts for, how many breakout rooms can we do so that it is, Rebecca, so that we might have 3 or 4 in a breakout room as opposed to 5 or 6, and then we can adjust the time accordingly. Because we could do about a 7-minute breakout.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then,
you
mhm.
said 3 to 4 in each room?
Yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
that'd
Yeah,
be 10 breakout rooms.
okay, perfect.
Um,
So what we would like for you to do in your breakout is we would like for you to share at this juncture. We would like to share the usefulness of what it is that you have that you have experienced today as it relates to strategic planning. So what is most useful or helpful so far as it relates to strategic planning and what we have covered so far? So we're at the end. There are a couple more things we want to share. We're putting it all together. You got your goals, you got your outcomes, you got your action steps, you got your who, you got your when. So in putting it all together is where we are. And so what so far is the most useful or helpful? I think I used one of your minutes, but we'll go with we'll go with 7 minutes, and your breakouts are smaller, so you should be able to share that. What is the most useful, helpful thus far?
Great. All right, breakout rooms have started. We'll see you back here soon.
Welcome back from the breakout rooms. Um, Hopefully you were able to again get to know your colleagues a little bit better. If you haven't made if you haven't reached a point where when you go into a breakout now, you've been with at least one person since we started 3 sessions ago, now 4 sessions. So in terms of the question that we asked you to spend time on in your breakout, the question is what is the most useful or helpful so far in the information that we've covered as it relates to strategic planning? You can use the chat. We won't be able to hear from every group, maybe 1 or 2. But you can also use the chat to tell us what emerged in your breakouts as being the most useful or the most helpful. You can use the chat, and we'll hear from like 1 or 2 people if you want to unmute and share with us what was the most helpful.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump in. Hi,
Mhm.
everyone. So
Hello.
our group ended the conversation by talking about how, the nonprofit space is so vast and so many of us come with different experiences and lenses to the work. But often that does not come with how to do a lot of the strategic planning aspects of a nonprofit role or the assessment pieces that we've discussed. So what we've found most helpful are just these tools that we can kind of take away to be able to bring back to our respective teams and really orient us in the work.
Thank you, Jessica, for sharing. Anybody else? And I don't know if there's any responses in the chat or not, but what's the most useful or the most helpful? This is a list, is it not? This is quite a bit, but it is strategic planning is comprised of these components. Anybody else? that wants to share?
Well, I hate to be the one that's always taking the microphone, but it's been really exciting. It's been really engaging. I love the way you presented everything. It's given us rubrics and fill in the blank lists and things that we could continue working so on to improve the way our organizations work. And mostly, one thing we talked in our group was and it was interesting because one person was less engaged on what they were doing, but knew what to do. And in my case, I'm more engaged in what I'm doing, but I don't know what I'm doing. And so the different people with different backgrounds could get an idea of what needs to be done and expand and really rely in our community and everybody, not just one person, to create the goals and to make the goals happen.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica and Sasa. Team, if we could go to slide 23. So in terms of monitoring and tracking, think practical. Think very, very practical. Monitoring, tracking your progress. You can focus on goal achievement. So just outright, have you achieved your goals? Are you seeing these outcomes come to pass? You can also monitor and track challenges. And I'm real big on that. Although we'd like to think we have perfect programs, oftentimes there's room for growth and enhancement. So, as well as nonprofit organizations. So honing in on challenges as you're monitoring and tracking. Are there any lessons learned? So are there any things that you've learned that you want to keep doing that you weren't doing? Or are there any things that you learned that you were doing that you should not continue to do? So that's important. And then also monitoring and tracking your success or your accomplishments. That's important. So the monitoring and tracking, and again, think practical. Think practical. Maybe at every staff meeting, there's an update on these components. Maybe at every board meeting or every other board meeting. Doesn't have to be every one, or every quarter, you're giving an update on progress towards achieving what you have in your plan. And then the evaluation and revision. So when the plan comes to an end, evaluating the timeline that you had. Was it 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? Providing some kind of report out or presentation. Team, we can go to the next slide. So think about the evaluation and or the report out as it relates to that. In your workbook on page 100, you'll kind of see some things here that we have noted, items that we've noted to evaluate and revise your plan. Maybe there's a report out, maybe there's a presentation, maybe you're looking at the timeline and determining if you're going to actually have the same duration for the plan the next time. When will you revise it? You know, when will you evaluate and revise kind of the complete implementation over the life cycle of that plan? So again, strategic planning. We did it. We worked through it. We could probably take each of these parts of the process and we could do an all-day workshop just on each part of the process. But again, think about the Nonprofit Management Institute from a fundamentally, these are 6 management functions that many, if not all, of our nonprofit organizations are going to find that they are engaged in operations. And so again, fundamentally, this is strategic planning. This is the process. These are the things that we should consider and think about. That concludes our session for today on strategic planning.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Dr. Palmer. We covered a lot. I'm sure everybody will need a little, as we call it, a brain break. That's what Lisa calls it. I need a brain break, and I agree with her. So just for closing, we only have 2 more sessions left, which is hard to believe, but it's real. So Next week, we'll be going over fundraising and financial management. We have two topics in the same session. So we'll be joined by Tracy Carriette, who is our CFO and Human Resources Director. So we're looking forward to having her join us for the financial management part, and then we'll continue on with fundraising. And then after that, the next session after that will be human resources and graduation. So it's all coming up quick. A couple notes just about our key member benefits associated with the topic. You can see our money saving partnerships there with Tech Impact, and then there's several publications and information center samples that members can, when you get a link to this slide deck, you can click on these links and find those there on our website. And then one final reminder here about some upcoming events we have. Really excited that this week we're kicking off our Building Resilient Futures event, our first one in this series in Asheville on Thursday. There's a couple more slots available. If any of you are interested in coming and you haven't registered yet, you can feel free to go to our events page of our website, and it's under there. And then we've got several others that are coming up after that as well. So feel free to attend the one that's closest to you. And then finally, we've got two more public policy conversations. We had the one yesterday in Charlotte, and I understand that went well. We had about 60 folks there. I don't know if any of you were there for that one, but it was good. And then we got Fayetteville coming up on May 11th and the Triad on June 15th. So we hope you can join for one of those if you're able to. It's a great chance to just hear about policies that are affecting nonprofits on the state and federal landscape, and what the center is doing to help promote nonprofits in our sector and help look out for their best interests. Great place to meet folks and talk about those issues as they're presented. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and we'll close out. We'll stick around for a couple minutes if folks want to join us for office hours, as we call them, although it's not really an hour, it's office minutes. We should call them office minutes.
Well, there
And
you
we'll
go.
stop the recording, and we will look out for that wraparound email from us with all the links from today's session. And good luck with all of your strategic planning efforts. It's one of my favorite topics. Starting in a dark cabin and ending up here midday. So enjoy your lunch, and feel free to stick around if you have questions. Thanks, Dr. Palmer. Thanks for Leslie being behind
Have
the
a great
scenes.
day. Have a good week.